Double check, it's all working. All right, cool. All right, so the first question I'm going to answer is how to use the JSON encoder in conjunction with a web component for decoding it. So that would be the first thing we're going to deal with. Okay, this is the project from last time. I'm going to use it as an example, or use it as a starting point. First thing I have to do is to start up the emulator, okay, so that we can actually test the software. The emulator for me is over at a kind of weird place. Yours will be at a different place depending on whether you use the portable version or whether you install it in Windows. So I'm going to run the emulator right now, get it started.
On these computers, do we have to install it?
On these computers, AI setup is not installed, so you will have to use the portable version of AI setup to do that. The portable version is on Moodle already.
Do you need the portable version? I'll let you use my flash drive. I have it installed, and you can just start it up and use it on that machine.
Are you concerned about the exam, or do you need it now?
No.
Okay, if you need it now, it's on Moodle itself. It's this link here, text modded AI setup 2.2 for portable installation, and you probably want to install it on a portable drive, like a USB thumb drive or something like that, and make sure that you run it, before the class in conjunction with App Inventor 2, because it will want to update the AI, how is it called? Companion on the emulator. So you want to get all that stuff done before you get to the exam, so you're not going to waste time during the exam to get that going. So this is, I think it's really nice because you can install it on an external device. If you have an external hard drive or USB thumb drive or anything like that, you can install it onto the external hard drive. And I would bring a backup too, just in case one breaks down, you have a second one ready to go. Yep.
Did you post the last copy of FD Score?
I do not remember whether I did it or not. I thought I did, but I could be wrong.
Sharing,
Yeah, so that's already up.
Okay.
That's the one with the share button. And I verified, with my cell phone. Remember last time, I was doing it on my cell phone. Basically, everything that I can normally share, using the share ability, would pop up. So it is basically using the same mechanism as a regular share with just about any application, which worked really well. And I think with the help of one of your fellow classmates, I was able to test whether the texting ability works, and it worked just fine. So it's really great. I mean, if you think about it, that really opens up all kinds of possibilities as far as connectivity is concerned for your application. All right, so getting back to our thing here. All right, so the question is, how do we make use of something that is already stored using the JSON encoder? That is the question. So with our application here, this is zoomed in a little bit too much. I would like to zoom out a little bit just so that I can see better. Sometimes I see better when it's zoomed out a little more. Okay, so when we look at the blocks, this is JSON. This is the serializer subroutine itself, and from the description, you can see that it returns a result. And it takes only one single parameter, which is what, not thing, it is what, okay? So the what can be anything, okay? So let me look up a use of that, because I think one of the buttons is going to save the JSON encoded list. So record score is, I'm just looking for the, there we go. Okay, so last time we worked on this block here, I have a button to save the match information to a file. And so the way it works is when I press that button, it will just trigger a text dialog box to open so that the end user can specify a name, the file name to save the information into. When the name is entered and the end user says, okay, this is the name, accept, then this event happens. After text input will happen, and as a result of that, this is how we use a serialized JSON. So you basically give it the list. The global variable match information is a list of key value pairs. So that is what we use, as a parameter for the what parameter to JSON, to the serialized JSON subroutine. What it returns is a string, and that string becomes the text that we are trying to save into the file. Whereas the response from the dialog box specifies the name of the file. Okay, so that's how we save that information. What we can do today is to restore that information. So in case there's a crash and you want to restore the application back to exactly where it was before, we'll work on that today. Is that okay?
Yep.
All right.
Sounds fun.
Sorry?
I said sounds fun.
It sounds fun, but it will be over in 5 minutes. All right, so this is how we do it. This part, I think we demonstrated that already. So I'm not gonna do this part, yet. Okay, I'm not gonna run the program because we ran it last time already. But what I do need to do is to go back to the designer because I need a non-visitable component called the web component, which I already have here. So web 1 down here, I'm not sure whether you guys can see it. So web 1 is a web component and it contains a block that I need to decode JSON encoded text, okay? Which is the reverse of what serialized JSON is doing. So we go back to blocks here, and oops, sorry, take it back. So in addition to save to file, I'm going to have another button to trigger the restore from file functionality. So I'm going to drag another button, probably put it here. Change the name of the button first to restore from file. Restore from file. And then change the text to use 20 point as the font size. And the text would spell restore from file, like so. So now I have everything that I need, all the components that I need to specify the actual code to do it. So I switch back to blocks and scroll to a clean place so I can put that code. I'm gonna need about the same thing, as save to file. In other words, I'm going to have to specify the file name or let the end user specify the file name to restore from. And the way to do that is a new notifier makes it easier because then I don't have to reuse the same notifier and find out, okay, which one are we specifying? Are we specifying that we are saving something, or are we specifying that we are restoring something? Because the difficulty is after text input, I cannot differentiate.
Which one are we?
It is an event corresponding to specifying the file to save to, or is it after the specification of the file name to restore from? So that really is the problem. It's not something that I cannot resolve using using a global variable to store the state or what is triggering the operation. It's just, sometimes it's more than we need to deal with. So the easier to deal with that is just to drag a new notifier into your application. Just have one extra component. We'll go ahead and rename this one notifier, restore file name. Okay, that's all we're going to need to do. Then when we go back to blocks, now we can just use the new notifier for this purpose. And let me scroll to a clean place, which is right about here. And we'll have the same basic structure as how we save a file, which is to have a button to correspond to the triggering of the text dialog, and then have another after text input corresponding to the new notifier that we just created a little bit earlier. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that part here. So we click on button restore from file, and we'll specify that we now want to handle the click event of that button. And the click event of that button is really just going to start a notifier and ask for the input. So in this case, I'm going to use notifier restore file name and specify show text dialog, which is requesting the end user to type something. I'm going to make it so that it cannot be canceled, so I don't have to deal with the cancel case. And then we'll use a little bit of explanation to explain what the dialog box is about. So we'll just say restore is the title, and then we'll describe it, specify the name of a file to restore a match from. Okay, pretty sure someone can improve the grammar here, but that's not the focus right now. All right, so what this is going to do is it will pop up the text dialog box where the end user can enter the file name to restore from. But when that name is entered, we have to handle the event corresponding to that particular event. So we go to notify restore file name, and then we take this one here. It's called the after text input event. So when the end user presses OK or enter, this event happens. So at that point, we'll do something pretty close to what we have done with this one here, except it's the exact reverse of what we're supposed to do. It's a little bit more complicated than that too, because what we'll do here is we're going to file one, and this time we want to read from a file. So we'll use this block to basically say, I'm going to try to read from a file, and the file name is the response from the dialog box that was triggered a little bit earlier. Now the issue with this is this block here is not going to return right away. In other words, it doesn't give you the content of the file right away. It will start the reading from the file, but it will trigger another event to tell you that, oh, okay, I got the content of the file that you're trying to read from. So now we have to have another event handler to handle that particular event, which is after the file is read and the content is ready for your application to process. And that event is under the file. It is called got text. And so under here, we can now specify the code to decode the text that we just read back from the file, so that we can restore match information from that stuff. Are we still doing okay? Because this is like a multi-stage thing, All right, so what we'll do here is we'll specify the web component. So when you look at the web component, any web component will give you all of these blocks here. And one of these is to decode JSON encoded text. So let me just find it. Should be here somewhere. Oh, it's right here. So it's called JSON text decode. You give it the text in JSON encoded format, and it returns whatever thing that the text is encoded. It is encoding. So we put it here. Our objective is to change our global variable called match information to the list returned by this thing. So we go to variables, and then we specify a set block here, and we are going to change match information as a global variable to the result of JSON text decode. What we're decoding is the text that we got back from reading the file. So that will complete the whole process. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and give it a try. Okay, let's go ahead and give this a try. We'll get the APK file back first, because this is a multi-screen application. Running it from AI2 doesn't work very well.
So if you were using TinyDB instead of file, would you not need to use that final step?
Oh, if you put it into TinyDB, it's a whole lot easier. I can show you how to do that too. Now the advantage of putting it into a file first is you don't have to. You can do more things with a file, because you can share a file with Dropbox, so you can back it up to a cloud storage really easily. You can attach it to an email. I think it's pretty easy to do that too, because using the share ability, you can share a file, and the way you share a file is it is going to be attached to a Gmail message, and so you can send the file to somebody as an attachment. So there's certainly some advantage to that approach as well. All right, so we now got the APK file back. It is number 13, and we can now go back to here and say ADB devices to make sure that we have a connection to the emulator. It is now attached, so that's good. Now we can say /adb install -r, which means it'll reinstall. It's okay. And then specify the path to the file that I just downloaded, which is ft_2, and it's the 13 version. There we go. And I think last time I saved the file already, so let's see if we can just restore from that file. The downside of doing this is if you forget the name of the file that you saved to, I don't see any easy way to list all the files available, because if you look at the file component, it doesn't seem to give you any ability to list the files that are available, and that is kind of a shortcoming because that becomes a little bit difficult. Yep.
I started making global names or global variables to store the names of the files that I was saved to, just so I can avoid that.
Or you can store it into TinyDB too. So TinyDB can serve as quote-unquote your directory. But if someone is going in and doctor the files and delete the individual files, you can still end up with a situation where it's not consistent. So I wish they have an ability to show us what files are available as a list. At least make it available to the application. Then the application can decide what to do with it. You can display a list picker and say, okay, which file do you want to restore from? And that makes it a lot more user-friendly than having to say, okay, this is the file that you have to remember the file name. Now, I think last time we also looked at the ADB shell and use a Linux command to basically show what files are available. So this is kind of what I would do right now, is to go to that folder, and the folder is under App Inventor, and the where is it? Oh, right here. It's not listed based on the alphabetical order. So what we need to do is to change directory to appinventor.ai_doctotag 2014 fall.ft_scorer2. Okay, I misspelled something here. appinventor.ai.doctotag 2014 fall.ft_scorer2. Did I misspell something? Okay, where's my... Oh, okay, I did not change folder. There we go. We're going to repeat this command here. I cheated a little bit. I used the shortcut on the shell. Then you cd to files, do the ls. It is still here, test.txt. So when we run the application, go back to the emulator, and I run the application. Hi, Walter.
If you just real quick, when you get a chance, can you look at power?
Oh, okay.
When you get a chance, it's running high CPU usage. It's alarming.
Oh, okay. I will take a look.
All right, thanks.
All right. So now we can specify restore from file, and specify test.txt, which is the file name that I chose from last time, and click OK. And well, unfortunately, we cannot quite tell whether it restored it or not, because I did not specify to change the lane numbers and stuff like that. But if I just click on target, it would not start with number 1. It would start with whatever was already there. So it did restore correctly, because otherwise it would not know to start with lane 2, and this is attempt number 2 already. Okay, so is that okay so far? Okay. Now, if you do not want to save it as a file, you just want to store it to TinyDB, it's a whole lot easier. Okay, So I will show you how to do that next. So if you want to store it into TinyDB, I'm going to use a different button. Or better yet, I can just use the back button to do it. Okay, so every time you use the back button from the screen, it will automatically save the match information into TinyDB as an entry. And every time we enter the screen, it will restore that from TinyDB. Okay, so that makes it kind of automatic. So we go to blocks here again, and this time we want to specify what happens when the back pressed event is triggered. And that is an event for screen 2 as a component. And right here is, you can specify the logic of what happens when the back button is pressed for screen 2, which is the current screen that we're dealing with. So the easy way to do this is, let me see if I have a TinyDB component already here, and I do not. Okay, so we have to go back to Designer and drag a TinyDB into the application, and that's under Storage, TinyDB, drag it here, and now we have TinyDB1 as a component. Then I can go back to blocks and specify what to do with TinyDB1. So I look at TinyDB1, it has all of these blocks here. The one that I do need is store value. That's the one that I need to do right now. The value to store is just going to be the list itself, match information. There is no need to JSON encode here because it does it automatically already. Okay. So that's why when we specify and try to use a TinyDB, we just have to specify the global variable and just say, okay, this is the value that we want to store, which is the match information, which is a list. It's complicated, but the tag is something that you have to specify, and you can just store that as, I'm just going to call it current match. Okay. So that's how you can save it. Now to restore it, you have to go to the initialize event and restore it from the initialization of the screen. And of course, it's going to be a little bit hard to find. We have the subroutine to do the initialization of the match, but I have to go find the event handler for initialize, for screen to initialize. I may not have one already specified. Let me see if I can specify a new one. If one is already specified and I try to specify another one, it will complain about it. So we'll go to screen to initialize, and there's no complaint, which is good. So when screen 2 is initialized, we'll do the reverse here. So we go to, in this case, we go to TinyDB again. And then this time we use get value. And if the value tag is not there, we will create an empty list. Oh, okay, we have to set the global variable too. So set match information to the result of the get value block of TinyDB1. And we'll be looking for the same tag, which is current match. And if the value is not found, we want to use an empty list. We don't want a string, we just want an empty list. So this way, when you press the back button on the screen, it will return to the splash screen, but it will also automatically save the current match into TinyDB. If you turn off the phone and start it off again, the moment you enter the screen, it will restore the match from the previous time. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's something sort of like that. And the program works, but I didn't store everything in one global variable like you did.
Mm-hmm.
I basically had 3 global variables,
Mm-hmm.
and I saved them as different variables within the TinyDB.
Yep.
And then what I noticed is that when you restore the time, to initialize the screen, like
Mhm.
for instance, the power gets cut off for some reason.
Right.
When you restore from TinyDB, it will actually put in my case, there are numbers, values. It'll actually put them in parentheses. and I was curious, what, do you have any ideas on that? I mean, because like my normal program, if I'm doing something, it just says like, your goal is this many steps.
If
But
he's
when I
using
restore-
parentheses-
When I restore the original,
Uh-huh.
it comes back with, your goal is, in parentheses, 80 steps, or whatever it is.
That means it is a list. Okay, if it is in parentheses, that means when you save it,
I
it is
made a
saved
list.
as a list
Yes.
and not as a number.
And that's what I did save it was as a list.
Well, then it gave you the right result.
Okay.
Because when you restore it, it is just restoring it back to whatever the object is when you gave it. So if when you save it, if it's saved as a list, then when it comes back, it's going to give you back a list.
Oh, okay, so if you really just want to save one value for one variable, you don't have to make it a list, I can do that.
That is correct.
Okay.
Whatever you save it, is whatever it will restore back into. If you save it as a list, it will give you back a list. If you save it as a number, it gives you back a number. If you save it as a text string, it will give you back as a text string.
If you use a list, if you call it by the index, then it won't show in parentheses.
Right, okay.
Right, because then you're accessing an element of a list, and depending on what the element is, then it will just save that particular element. Because if you have a list inside a list, it will still be saved as a list. Okay? Alright, so we'll give this a try and see whether this works or not. The other thing we'll also do is we'll call the initialize thing, just so that it will update the screen correctly. And I think one of these will do it. And let's see, which one is it? Update match information. Okay, so we'll just make it look nicer. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. So we'll make it look nicer by restoring the match information, or use the global match information to change the button labels so that it will look right. Okay, and we'll duplicate this block, and go to initialize as well. And all right. And this one I want to put a conditional statement around it, because if match information is blank or nothing, is an empty list, I don't want to restore it. So let's go ahead and check that first. So we use use a conditional statement, and if the condition is true, we'll go ahead and update all the buttons. And the condition is going to be how big is the list. So we'll use a math function here and say if the length of the list, if list is empty, then that's nice. Okay, we can just use that then. So we'll say if match information is empty, is not empty. Okay, we need a negation in front of all of this. Logic, specify negation, put it here. There we go. So this is saying if not is list empty, get global match information. It sounds like Yoda, don't I? That's how Yoda speaks, right? If not is list empty, get global match information. Then we'll call, update match information using the global variable match information. In normal speak, this is basically saying if match information as a global variable is not empty, then we'll use it to update all the button text on the screen. Now we know why Yoda speaks the way he does. He's a programmer. He knows how to program.
What if he's going to be in number 7? He's going to be in number 7.
Yep. All right. So we'll give this a try. Okay, so we'll go ahead and rebuild the APK file, upload it, and this time we'll try the automatic save and restore function. So build, save APK. And when is that movie coming out? Episode 7. Sorry?
Sometime next year.
Next year?
Like December or something.
All right. So we have the APK file, and we can get out of the shell account here, or the shell access, and then just install the latest one, the latest APK file. Get the emulator ready. And run it. Here we go. So the first time we run it, there won't be any entry in TinyDB, and as a result, it won't restore anything from TinyDB. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and set up a match here. Start lane is 2. The total number of lanes will be 4, and let's say that we are in attempt 2 of target 1 already. Okay. So this is the current state. Just kind of remember this. We are on lane 2, target 1, attempt 2, 212. And then I'll just press the back button. So when you press the back button, oh, you know what? I forgot one thing. I should also close this screen, because the automatic action of closing the screen is not happening anymore, because I have just now specified what I want to do when the back button is pressed, and I forgot to specify to close the screen, and that's why it won't close the screen. But it should have saved that entry into TinyDB already. Okay. Now there are 2 ways for me to confirm that it has already saved the match information into TinyDB. One way is just to shut down the entire emulator, start it all over again, and see if we can restore that. The second way, which is a better way to verify that we did save the information, is to take a look at the text file representing TinyDB. We did that once in a semester, and I'm pretty sure most people cannot find out which date we did it. So I'm going to do it again, because you might find this a useful way to debug your application is by looking into the representation of TinyDB files. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the shell, and go to /data/data, which is the folder that contains all of the application specific files, and then we'll go to app inventor.ai _doctor tag 2014 fall.ft scorer2, and then do an ls here. And you can probably guess which subfolder contains TinyDB. Databases. Yep. So go to databases, do ls, and sure enough, we have webview.db. That's not what I'm expecting.
Files.
It's actually in file. Nope. Cache. Oops. Nope. Huh.
Have you written anything?
Shared preferences. That's it. Shared prefs. There we go.
There it is.
Yep. It's really kind of awkward, but it's under the folder called shared prefs or shared preferences, and it is named tinydb1.xml. Okay, so if you drag multiple tinydbs into the application, I think it will create multiple XMLs. Okay, so this is the moment of truth. Okay, can we handle it? Take a look at the tinydb1.xml, which is just an XML file, which is basically a text file, and it has this content in it. Okay, oh, this is way too much. I don't know what to do with this. Well, it is using HTML encoding. ampersand quote is really just the quote symbol, which is what we use to enclose strings. So this is an open quote, lane number, which is the content of the string itself, and here we have the end quote. And here's a comma, and then we have another open quote here, a 2, and then another end quote here. So it is saying lane number is 2. Here we have something else. Let's take a look at this one. Open quote, target, end quote, and the value that we are saving is 1. That's matching what we are saving, isn't it? Okay, because we are on target 1 and we are on attempt 2. So here we have the attempt, open quote, attempt, end quote, 2. So everything that we were supposed to be saving is already saved. Okay? And for those of you who are looking at this right now, Is this reminding you of something? You know, using the square brackets, the commas, the quotes, and stuff like that? It's JSON encoded. In other words, internally, App Inventor has the ability to do encoding, JSON encoding, but there's no easy way to access that ability directly, and that's why I had to write my own serialized JSON, which is kind of duplicating something that's already in AI App Inventor. But since the interface is not open to us, you know, I cannot actually use it, and I have to write my own encoder so that you can get the text representing a list and do whatever you want with the text. This is specific, okay? You can only use it to save into a TinyDB. No, you know, there's no other application. Okay? Does everybody kind of understand what I just said? You know, it's a duplicate effort, but it was necessary, even though, you know, I would like not to have to do it, but it's necessary. All right, so now the other thing we can now do is to close the application, force it close, or just power down the whole thing, repower up the emulator, and see if we can restore all of this stuff. Okay, so that's what we're going to do next. We'll get out of the shell first, and then we'll just go ahead and close the entire, or power down the entire emulator. So we'll power off the emulator itself. And that feature actually does not work very well. You can see that power off. It will keep doing this, you know, a long time. You know, you just basically have to close the close button. Click the close button on the emulator, you know, after a while. And this is a problem not unique to this particular version of the emulator. Apparently, it's kind of universal to all the Android emulations. So I'm going to just close the application itself and then restart it from here. So we'll go ahead and run emulator again. So this will start up the emulator. It's basically the same thing as, you know, removing the battery of your mobile device and then put it back in and power up the device again. Okay, so this is pretty much, this is a hard crash. Okay. All right, so the emulator is up. We'll go back to the application. Not entirely up yet, it's still preparing the SD card. Do you guys know that if you have close to $400, you can now buy a close to 1 terabyte SD card? It's expensive, okay? It's almost $400. Yep.
Actually, you can buy a 512 flash drive now for about $100.
For $100, you can buy half a gig, basically, half a terabyte.
No idea.
Wow.
No, half a terabyte. Yeah.
That's a half terabyte, which is a lot of stuff. That is a lot of stuff. So if your dog eats it and it's a micro SD card, you're gonna lose a lot of stuff.
Better double save that.
Yeah, well, you know, the old excuse of, you know, my dog ate my homework. Now it's not just your homework. It's all the pictures that you have taken in the past 20 years, and all the movies that you have collected, and all the music that you have collected over the past 20 years. Gone because the dog ate it. You drop that micro SD card into the dog food bowl, and then you have one of those dogs that just go like that without really noticing what it's eating. Yep, there goes your lifelong collection of stuff. Not a very pleasant thought. Yep, it restored everything. So now with this automatic ability to restore everything, you might want to give the end user an extra button on the splash screen and say start a new match, because otherwise there's no way to start a new match anymore. Is that making any sense? Okay, so to start a new match is easy. You just go to TinyDB1 and remove that entry. Then it will automatically trigger the logic to start a new match. All right, any other questions? I think I have demonstrated a few things that you might find useful, and maybe this is a good time to upload it to Moodle already. Yeah, so let's go ahead and do that. Export and go to Moodle and upload it. Did I mention to you guys that the district has reconsidered the requirement that a platform has to be authorized before faculty can use it? So now that clause is taken out of the proposed regulation and policy.
Good choice.
I'm not really quite sure, who said what to whom and ended up with this result, but it was not me.
Well,
I deny any responsibility.
and since you're getting the sensible results, it's probably just as well.
Well,
Yeah.
FT score to with save and restore. So there are two ways to save and restore. One is automatic using the back press button, and the other one is explicit using a file. Yep. Two save and restore methods. Explicit file save restore and automatic using back rest. Initialize. Those are the names of the blocks. And you specify the file. Look at all those files. I think this is number 6.aia. It's right here. That's why I know. All right, save and display. Excuse me. So are there any other questions, any other things, techniques that you guys want me to maybe demonstrate or have questions about? Yep, go ahead.
How to push a file to a server from within.
How to push a file to a server.
Yeah.
It depends on what the server is. If you have an FTP client installed, share would actually display the FTP client as one way to share. So you can use that, for that purpose.
Right.
But it's not going to be very automatic because it is actually, pretty.
Right. Is there a way, I'm guessing like using get and post?
Yeah, you can use post because post can post a file, but that means on the remote side, it also needs to be able to handle a post with a file.
Okay. Do you think you could demonstrate that?
I may not remember exactly how to do it, but I can kind of do the search of the information that you need to do it.
Okay.
Okay. So the first thing the first thing I'll do is to kind of clarify the question and make sure it's recorded in the videos, just so that if someone wants to check it out, they know what this is. This is an answer to which question. So the question is, if you want to save a file to a server that is remote, okay, how do we go about doing that? That is the question. And the answer to that question is partially we have that already because you will need a web component. Okay, so the web component is something that you will need. And when you go through the list of a web component, one particular block is related to what we want to do, and it has to do with the post file, this particular block here. So when you read the text here, it performs an HTTP post request using the URL property and data from the specified file, excuse me. So the URL is already a property of the Web1 component, and you can set it separately, but it will use the data from the specified file. If the save response property is true, the response will be saved, and the got file event will be triggered. The response file name property can be used to specify the name of the file. The save response property is false. If the save response property is false, the got text event will be triggered. Okay, so this will basically post the content of a file. And I'm not sure whether it is going through the same thing as an upload, because you can't upload a file using HTTP. On the other side, you can test whether it is actually doing that or not. The easiest way, are you going to program using PHP?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can check out your PHP post file and upload. and see how it's done. So in PHP, the documentation, let's see here, uploading multiple files, post method upload, there we go. All right, so this way we can just take a quick look at the source code here. Okay. So if you want to do it in HTML, this is how you do it, but this is not the question, okay? The question is how do we process it when the file is submitted. So when the file is submitted, okay, the super global variable underscore, $ underscore files will contain the uploaded file information. So it's basically done automatically in PHP. So your PHP script will have something in this particular. They call this a super global variable because it is not a global variable that you define. It is something that is provided by PHP already. So that's really one neat part about PHP is it has all of this stuff done already. If you do it in Perl, then you have to go through a lot of extra stuff, just to see whether a file is uploaded. If it is, where is it, and so on and so forth. So using this, you can find out the original name of the file on the client machine, the MIME type of the file, and MIME should be actually all uppercase because it's an acronym. If the browser provides this information, an example would be image/GIF. So in your case, it will probably just be a very generic thing like text, okay? The size in bytes, the temporary file name of the file in which the uploaded file was stored on the server. So this is the most important part if you want to do something about this file on the server.
Right.
Because right now it is actually temporary, which means when this script ends its execution, the server can, at that point, delete this temporary file. Now, whether the server is actually going to clean up right away or not is a different question, okay? I think with most PHP installation, that is not the case. So it will keep basically a whole bunch of temp files on the server, and it will run a cleanup script periodically. So there will be a cron job set up every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever to clean up stuff that is unclaimed, basically.
Right.
But the bottom line is you have to do it within the script to do something about it. If you don't, that file can disappear, and you won't be able to find it either because this property will not be set. So is that kind of helping you a little bit? Okay.
The part that I'm still confused on is how do I actually tell it to upload to, like for instance, the Power Server? So I just put post file and then attach a text block.
Right.
And then how do I get it to actually send it to, for instance, like the Power Server?
You have to designate the file name of the script that handles it.
Okay, so I would specify, like if I called it file process.php.
Right.
That's why I'd actually put in power
Right.
dot and then my username and everything.
Correct. So the PHP script to receive the file on the server will look at these properties and see if the file is actually uploaded. And that's assuming the block that we just mentioned is actually uploading a file and not just uploading the content of the file, but not the file itself.
Gotcha.
Yep. And that part I don't really know for sure because the description is a little bit vague on that. Yep.
When I was, I think, I don't know, he asked a variant of it, but when I go to in my application, I go to save something to the DB, it works the first time. And then I go to save the same content to the DB and open it from the list picker, and it gives me an error and not use this argument. And it gives me the text with a 1 after it.
So, okay, the problem that you're describing is related to TinyDB, right? Okay, can you describe again, the sequence of events?
I will create a new text document or whatever and save that content to a TinyDB as the value.
Okay.
And the title as a tag. And then I open it and it works fine. And I go to save it again. And it won't open again. It'll just show you can't say accept the argument. You can't accept the argument. And it gives the text
Okay.
with a 1.
Okay, let me try to clarify. When you say that when you save it again, are you using TinyDB to save it? Okay, so you're talking about you're talking about store value. So when you store it, so the problem is when you store it the second time, the store block is causing the issue, complaining.
No, it's when I go to reopen the value.
So when you try to get value again,
Yeah.
that is when it causes a problem. Okay, does it give you a runtime error, or does it just return value if tag not here, not there?
Gives me a runtime error.
Give you a runtime error?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you save again, it's causing an issue. Or when you save again and then try to restore or use the get value, then it gives you a problem. Okay, so we can test it and see whether that is a potential issue. So we'll go ahead and test it. The way we test it is just to have a read value right after store value. So this way it should replicate what you have. Okay, so we'll go to TinyDB and put a get value. Oh, we have that already. We can just duplicate this block. So we'll go ahead and put this block here. Is that resembling what you were encountering?
I'm going between multiple screens though each time, so I'll open it, save it, and then open it again, and it'll play.
I see. So you're okay. When you go across multiple screens, are you using the close method to go back to the previous screen, or are you opening a different screen all the time each
No,
time?
I'm using close method.
You're using close? Okay. That makes it not as easily replicate. I cannot replicate the problem easily here because I don't have the necessary code to do it here. You can send your application to me. You can send the AIA file to me and then re-describe the problem a little bit. Because then you have to tell me which button to click to replicate the exact problem, and I'll take a look at it.
Alright.
Okay. Okay. So it's not this particular issue here. All right. But since I'm already here, I might as well do this. Okay. Because when the back button is pressed, normally it will close the screen where you're at. But if I handle this particular event the way I want to handle it, it does not do the automatic screen closing anymore. So that means if I want to close the screen, I'm going to have to do it myself, which means we have to use not here. It's probably under control. So under control, we have a way to close the screen, and in this case, we'll just close the screen with no value as a result. So we'll put it here. And that will basically save the current state of the match, and then just close the screen. So we'll go back to the splash screen. Okay. Are we doing okay so far? Okay. Now on the splash screen itself, when we come back from screen 2, what do you think the splash screen should do? Okay. Let me repeat that question. So right now, when the back button is pressed on screen 2, which is quote unquote the main screen, that's how we visualize the match itself. When we press the back button on the screen, it will close itself. Okay, that part is okay, easy to visualize. But when we get back to the splash screen, do we need to do something or what? And what should we do at that point?
Don't you offer to restore that match?
It depends on what the intent is. When
Yeah.
someone presses the back button.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining if someone is pressing the back button, that person actually want to close the application. It's like, I'm done with this, okay? So that means, in the splash screen, you can probably ask a question like, do you want to close the application? And confirm and say that, if so, it's okay because, the match information is already saved and it will be restored automatically the next time you restart the application. Just so that the end user knows, okay, you're not losing anything, we can actually go ahead and close right now. Okay, so that would probably be the right thing to do. So let's go ahead and specify the code to do just that. Okay, if you guys don't have any other questions that you want me to answer, yep, go ahead.
If you would it be more prudent? It's more. I mean, I put a close application, but on my home screen as a natural way to, and they can't go anywhere but the home screen if they want to go anywhere. But what is more prudent? I mean, if you have a closed application screen, you probably would just not want the back button to do anything on the home screen, right? Or should it be, should you allow both to do in close of the application?
I think in that case, the question is, what is the normal behavior? Oh, you can close the entire application too, so you're not closing one particular screen, you're closing the whole thing. So I could have used this in screen 2, is to close the entire application. I didn't see this option here. Before you close the entire application, it might be helpful to ask the end user, is this what you want to do? Especially if you don't have the mechanism to save the state of your application right at that point and have the ability to restore automatically the next time you start the application. Yep. So that's kind of up to you. Each application can do it differently. Any other questions? Okay, so just going with what we have here. Now we're back to screen 1, which is the splash screen. Let me just show you the code so that you can detect that you're coming back from another screen, and trigger the logic to say, okay, do you really want to quit? Okay. So we'll go ahead and deal with that logic. So that logic is going to be triggered by an event, and that event belongs to screen 1, which is the only component that can trigger an event like that. And that is other screen closed. So in this case, we have to check which screen is closed. I mean, you really should do that anyway, is to check which screen is closed. So we go to text here, and then we do a text comparison. So other screen name, oops, hover get, there we go. So if the other screen name is screen 2, then we'll go ahead and do something about it, because that's the one that we know about. So say screen 2 is here. So whatever we specify here inside this block is the logic to handle the event when screen 2, which is the quote-unquote main screen, is closed because of back pressed, and we are now back to screen 1, which is our splash screen. So what we want to do is to trigger a box, okay, using a notifier. And since this screen does not have a notifier yet, we'll just add one to it. So we'll add a notifier to the splash screen. And going back to blocks, I will go ahead and trigger and say, okay, do you really want to close the screen? Okay, do you want to really exit and get out of the application? And the way to do that is to go to notifier 1 and specify, in this case, show choose dialog. So that one, this is the one where the end user can click one of the buttons and say, yes, I want to exit, or I do not want to exit. Okay. And we can turn off cancel, okay, because we want to be able to display custom text for both buttons in this case. So now we can specify all of the text that goes into the buttons, as well as the title and the message of the dialog box. So title would be confirm, okay, and here we'll say, do you want to exit from this app? Okay. And then in the text here, we can be double, we can be very specific. Well, okay. We'll do yes and no first, okay, and then later on you can change the text. So what this will do is it will only show the dialog box, but it's not going to come back with the answer of whether yes or no is clicked. To deal with that, you will have to go to notifier 1 and select after choosing in order to find out what is the choice of the end user. Yep.
You put less than. If the other screen is less
Oh, equal to. Thank you. We have to check for the equality. All right. So now that okay. So this will show the dialog box, and the end user can take his or her time to find out, okay, do I want to exit or not? And if the answer is yes or no, this block is triggered because that's after choosing. And in here we can have a conditional statement to do something about, okay, what if it is yes and what if it is no. So we'll go ahead and specify an else here, and we'll check if the answer is yes. So go to text, check for equality, and say if the choice which is basically just the text on the button itself, is yes. And once again, it is usually a good idea to use a global variable. Even though it is just yes, it is still a good idea to use a global variable. So this way, if you put all the global variable into one particular place, it's easier to localize your application to a different language. So if the answer is yes, then you can just go ahead and close the entire application. So you can say, you go to close application here. If the answer is no, then you can decide what you want to do. Okay, you can just do nothing if you want to. And so the splash screen will still be displayed all by itself. That probably is not a bad option. So let's go ahead and build our APK and test it one more time. I'm pretty sure I've said this already at least twice or 3 times already, but App Inventor does make writing apps a whole lot easier compared to the Java approach. Okay, the Java approach gives you a lot more flexibility. Your app will look a lot more modern because it will conform to all the new standards. Okay, but the problem is it's also a lot more complicated. There's a lot of details involved in order to do it in Java. You can also see that I hardly need to open up any additional tabs when I'm writing an application using App Inventor, because the helps are pretty much mostly built in already, and I can just click on a particular component and find out what I can do with it. That's not the case when you're programming in Java. So it would not be atypical, especially when you take cisp362, you will find out that I will have the entire top of the browser filled with tabs, and it won't even be able to tell the title of each tab. Yep, go ahead.
I was wondering if you've ever checked out PhoneGap from Adobe. It lets you design mobile apps simultaneously for iOS and Android, and apply material design things. And,
what is the name of the Adobe product?
PhoneGap. PhoneGap.
Gap.
Yeah.
Phone
Check it out.
Gap.
It's pretty cool.
Okay. I'll take a look right after this. So we'll go ahead and upload the application. Alright, so the emulator is running, and we want to make sure the device is up, and then we can do the upload. And this one is going to be 15. Alright, so let's go ahead and check it out. And this one will do the automatic restore from last time as well, because we already have that in the TinyDB entry. So we'll go ahead and move on to target 2. Oh, it didn't reset the attempt number, so I'm gonna have to. Okay. That part is still not working. I did not put in the reset of the attempt number. The target number is updated. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. We'll press the back button in screen 2. It will give us the confirm screen of screen 1. If I say no, it's going to go back to this part here where I can start screen 2 again. Now on the other hand, if I say yes, then I'm getting out of the entire application. So that's exactly how it's supposed to work. All right, so to look into what you just suggested, let's go ahead and take a look. So it's an Adobe product, which usually means I don't have enough hard drive space to install it.
Yeah.
It's called PhoneGap. Okay, there we go. And PhoneGap has its own domain name, which is kind of interesting. Okay, introduction to PhoneGap build, building your first app. Okay, let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Don Woodward, Principal Scientist on the PhoneGap Build team. Today I'm going to show you how to use Adobe's PhoneGap Build cloud service, part of the Creative Cloud, to build your mobile application using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. It's really easy. Let's get started. Let's go ahead and log into the PhoneGap Build service. I'll open up my web browser and I will type build.phonegap.com and go to the PhoneGap website and sign in. Now I'm signing in using my Adobe ID, and we'll cover account creation later. What we'll do first is create a new app. I'll press the new app button, and I am asked to provide the source code for my app. I can choose to use a Git repository, or I can upload a zip file. Let's go ahead and upload a zip file. We're going to use an app called Page Slider, developed by an Adobe evangelist named Christoph Konrads. Page Slider is a very simple app that shows how to do hardware-accelerated page transitions on mobile. I've got it open here. You can see I've got index.html, some images, and some CSS. What I'm going to do is turn my folder into a zip file by compressing it, and you can see there it is on my desktop. Now, in PhoneGap Build, I'll go ahead and upload that zip file. It's really that simple. I'll go ahead and choose the zip file. And you can see, having uploaded the zip file, it automatically figured out the name of my app based on the assets inside the zip file, and says it's ready to build. So I'll go ahead and build it by pressing the Ready to Build button. As you can see, I've got a little animation that shows the builds in progress for all of the simultaneous builds taking place. Now that all of my applications are built, I'm going to install it on my iPad mini. So I'll take my iPad mini and run a free application called Scan to scan the QR code. I'll hold it up to the computer and scan that QR code, and it's as simple as that. I'll press the install button, and my application that I just built using PhoneGap Build is being installed on my iPad mini. I select it, and I can see 3 menu choices, and when I press them, I can see pages sliding in and out very quickly. And that's the sample application. Now what I'm going to do is edit the application and show you how easy it is to update it. I'll go ahead and open up the index.html file for this application in Adobe Edge Code, an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript editor. So if I look at the HTML, I can see in the body there's div ID equals container. And knowing HTML, I'm going to reason that that is where the main content is going to be placed. So right before that, I'll put a little line break here and a little heading and say, hello PhoneGap world, and save it. Now what I'll do is minimize that window. I'll make...
I'm sorry, I'm going to fast forward here.
Even more. Let's go ahead and turn on hydration for our application. So here I am at the main apps page for PhoneGap Build. I can see my list of apps, and I want to make Page Slider a hydrated app. So what I'll do is click on Page Slider, and I can go into Settings. I'll click on Settings, and I can push the button here to enable hydration. And I'll go ahead and save the app, and now I can see that my app has hydration enabled and hydration is pending. I'll go ahead and click on the Apps button to get my list of apps. The first time you hydrate your app, it will rebuild your app and you will reinstall it on your device. And that will be the last time you'll ever install your app on your device because it is now hydrated. I'll go to the app page for my app. Oh, I can see hydration is complete. So one last time, I'll go ahead on my iPad mini and scan that QR code again to install the hydrated version of the app on my iPad mini. Go ahead and install it. The first time I run my app, I can see that it says loading hydrated application. And there it is. Hello PhoneGap World is now a hydrated application. So let's go ahead and update it and see how the workflow is improved. I'll go back to my text editor. And this time I'll change the text from Hello PhoneGap World to Hello Hydrated World. Go.
Since I don't have enough time to show the entire thing or look into it, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But right now, I'm thinking this is, it's basically turning web pages into an application.
Yeah, it can do basically just about anything, like across all devices. I don't think it's just web pages.
But can it access like the on-device, on mobile devices like GPS, accelerometer, that sort of thing? I mean, it sounds like the actual quote-unquote programming language here is JavaScript. So whatever JavaScript can do, it can do as well.
I think you can do a lot more than just JavaScript.
But the guy is not showing a whole lot,
Yeah,
of the quote-unquote programming aspect of it.
It's pretty basic.
So
this video, I've never watched this one before. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the way it is presented in this particular video, I would say this is kind of like App Inventor for Art New Media.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Which is an easy way to do the design part
Right.
and turn it into an application with the focus on design. Yep.
And make it act like an app
Right.
without necessarily, as you say, being able to access the hardware.
Correct. Now, and plus, all the programming or the logic of the application, seem to be specified in JavaScript, which means, it's not exactly graphical programming like App Inventor.
Right.
You still have to do all the programming in JavaScript,
Right.
which is easier than Java in many ways, but at the same time, it will also.
As much work.
Sorry?
Seems like you're doing just as much work for less.
Right. Well, it is cross-device compatible because it is probably the back end is probably still using a web browser as an engine to run the JavaScript, because somebody has to run the JavaScript. So it can either run on its own, by Adobe, extracting the JavaScript engine from browsers and whatnot, or it can basically just run the JavaScript, using a web browser. And I'm not sure, whether you can get a web browser to display an app, like an app and not like a web page inside a web browser. But that seems to me that's how they do it. That's how they can maintain easily cross-platform compatibility. Because iOS uses Objective-C, which is a really kind of obscure but interesting, object-oriented programming language based on C. It's not based on C++. Android is based on Java. Now those two are related programming languages because they are all descendants from C, but that's as far as you can say they are related, because they are completely different, as programming languages. The libraries are entirely different, and that's why traditionally speaking, porting an application between these two platforms can take a long time, because it will take someone who knows both programming languages and translate the logic across, and sometimes it doesn't translate very easily. It can do it, it's just not easy.
In the demo, I guess you'd call it, that I kind of read through on PhoneGap was a guy designing a tip calculator.
Uh-huh.
And he was just kind of like talking about the ease of porting it because of PhoneGap's ability to generate for HP, WebOS, or whatever the hell it's called.
Which is ancient history by now.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think it probably is JavaScript driven, because you can do that also using a web page. You can write JavaScript quite easily and make a on-screen calculator that has all the buttons, and you can push the buttons. So it seems like that's how they program, quote-unquote program these applications, is they use JavaScript as the programming language. So whatever you can do with a web browser, you can do it in this app here. But what you cannot do with a web browser, which is accessing the accelerometer and other devices, it may not be able to do it either. So that's my feel about this. It's that's the limitation of it, because it doesn't really hook onto the actual operating system, where App Inventor gives you access to the Bluetooth devices, and many other things that you can actually access.
It's generating actual Java code.
Right. It is using an intermediate representation first, for the App Inventor quote-unquote specific language. But in the back end, it is taking that and actually generate Java code, and then compile the Java code and package all the class files into the APK file, and then that gets installed. Okay, but that's interesting. Thank you for bringing that up. Because for people who want something that's quick and is mostly presentation and not as much logic, this certainly is an alternative.
And and that cross-device compatibility isn't to be sneezed at.
Right.
It can be
This would be
a
nice
ton
for
of
something
trouble
like
to create that.
for like the Amazon web store.
Right, because it doesn't need to access
doesn't
the
actually-
devices
no.
on your mobile device.
And then you can certainly release it to all the
Yep.
platforms.
Well, and it's not like Adobe is known for its ability to work with hardware. That's not necessarily its thing. It's
That is
it's
correct.
presentation.
It's more presentation and less of a developer, back end.
Yeah.
When you look at Adobe,
Flash, Photoshop, Reader.
no. Which one is the one that that help you develop websites?
Dreamweaver.
Dreamweaver. Now, Dreamweaver was not it was Macromedia,
Yeah,
and then
that's
they got
originally
bought
bought
by
now,
Adobe.
yeah.
Which I think someone owned it before Macromedia. I
Yeah,
might be wrong about
there was somebody before Macromedia too. But when you look at Dreamweaver, the code that it generates is actually quite messy.
It's quite
Now,
messy.
if you go into the files generated by Dreamweaver, tweak it, Dreamweaver itself won't be able to process it anymore.
Yeah.
It won't recognize its own product. It's like, oh, it has been slightly tweaked. No, it just go like, no, I'm giving up. It is yours now.
I love that.
I've done that too, because the code it generates has limitations. So sometimes you just want